The writer Mark Twain once made this incredibly perceptive observation. He said, "History doesn't repeat itself, but it often rhymes."
Right. Yeah, that's a classic
It
one.
really is. And I want you, listening to this right now, to just think about your own life for a second. Have you ever noticed those underlying patterns,
Hmm.
like situations at work or maybe in relationships that just feel eerily familiar? You walk into a meeting with a new boss and somehow you end up in the exact same frustrating dynamic you had with your old boss.
Oh, totally. It's like you're playing out this invisible rhythm over and over again, and you just can't quite figure out why the song never changes.
Exactly. It is a universally frustrating experience.
It really is. And what's crucial to understand here is that Twain wasn't just being witty about historical timelines. He was actually laying down a philosophy of attention.
Oh, interesting. How so?
Well, if you can learn to hear that rhyme beneath the noise of your present moment, you develop this rare navigational intelligence. You stop being surprised by the same exact roadblocks.
Right, because you've seen them before.
Exactly. You start anticipating the music instead of just reacting to the drums.
But the catch is, most of us never develop that intelligence because we are just too busy performing certainty.
Yeah, that's the trap.
We are so consumed with acting like we know exactly what's going on and looking good while doing it that we completely miss the pattern. And that brings us to the source material for today's deep dive.
Which is fantastic, by the way.
It is. We are looking at a really densely packed, fascinating collection of insights titled The Rhyme Beneath the Rhythm. And it pulls together ideas spanning, classical Stoic philosophy, modern business strategy, sports coaching, ancient proverbs, all to decode how we can basically stop tripping over our own feet.
It's quite a mix.
It really is. So,
Yes.
okay, let's unpack this because getting out of our own way starts with a massive paradox about the ego.
It is deeply counterintuitive,
Mm,
honestly.
yeah.
The core argument here is that the more you focus on yourself, right, like your performance, your anxiety, your career trajectory, the worse everything actually goes.
Mm.
And conversely, the more you forget yourself in service of the actual task at hand, well, the better the outcomes become.
I was thinking about this, and the best way I can describe the ego in this context is that it's like a glitchy GPS app on your phone.
Oh, I like that.
Right. When the map fails to load and it just shows you a giant blinking blue dot of where you are.
Yes. Taking up the entire screen.
Exactly. Take up the whole screen. You have no idea where the turns are. You can't see the traffic jam 2 miles ahead, and you have no context for your environment at all because you are entirely zoomed in on yourself.
That is a brilliant way to visualize it. I mean, when that blue dot is taking up the whole screen, you are essentially flying blind. You're reacting to every pothole as if it's a personal attack,
Yeah.
rather than just a feature of the road.
But, okay, I have to play devil's advocate for a second here.
Go for it.
If I turn off that GPS, if I stop focusing on my own career progression, my own performance metrics, my own brand, don't I just become a doormat?
That's the fear, right?
Yeah, in a hyper-competitive world, how do we actually justify turning that self-monitoring off?
Well, this raises an important question, and the management thinker Peter Drucker provides a really mechanical explanation for why turning it off is actually your biggest competitive advantage.
Wait, really? How does Drucker frame it?
So, Drucker believed that getting out of your own way fundamentally means subordinating your ego to the task. He would tell leaders the task matters, and you are a servant.
You are a servant. Wow, okay.
And he identified listening as the primary mechanism for this. But, and this is key, he didn't call listening a skill. He explicitly called it a discipline.
Wait, unpack that difference for me. Why does it matter if it's a skill versus a discipline?
Think about it this way. A skill is something you acquire once, like riding a bike or, using a spreadsheet. Once you have it, you just possess it.
Right, you don't really forget how to ride a bike.
Exactly. But a discipline is something you have to practice every single day against the persistent, heavy resistance of your own nature.
Oh, I see.
Your ego naturally wants to speak. It desperately wants the room to know that it already has the answer. That is the giant blue dot blinking.
The blinking dot, yes.
So the discipline of listening is making the active, daily, conscious decision to override that biological impulse, to just shut your mouth and to let reality instruct you.
Because, I mean, if you are busy formulating your really smart response while the other person is talking, you aren't actually gathering any data about your environment.
No, not at all.
You are just talking to yourself inside your own head.
Precisely.
Yeah.
You were locked in the blue dot.
There's a story in our sources about Ian Happ, the baseball player for the Chicago Cubs, that makes this incredibly concrete.
Oh, that's a great example.
Yeah, so he has this great rookie season, but then he hits a wall in his second year and gets demoted back down to the minor leagues.
Ouch.
Right. Now put yourself in his shoes. Your ego in that situation is screaming. It is bruised. The natural instinct is to try and prove the decision makers wrong, right?
Of course you want vindication.
You want to hit a home run every time you step to the plate just to send a message to the manager who demoted you.
Which, neurologically speaking, is the absolute worst state to be in when trying to hit a 90-mile-an-hour fastball.
Exactly. Happ talked about how he had to actively shift his mindset just to survive it. Instead of trying to perform for the coach's approval, which is an outcome he literally couldn't control, he stopped caring about the decision makers entirely.
He shrank the blue dot.
He shrank it. He focused purely on the mechanics of his swing and his daily process. He essentially said, I'm going to make myself undeniable.
And it worked.
It totally worked. By getting his ego out of the way, he stopped over-swinging, he found his rhythm, and eventually made his first All-Star team.
What Happ did there is, well, it's a modern execution of something the Roman Emperor Marcus Aurelius wrote about thousands of years ago.
Really? The emperor?
Yeah, here's a man who literally ruled the known world. Yet, in his private journals, he defined ambition as a trap.
That's wild.
He realized that tying your well-being to what other people say or do, like a baseball manager or a political rival, is a form of slavery. Real mastery, he argued, is tying your well-being strictly to your own actions.
It's just your own acts.
Not to outcomes, not to the applause, just the quality of the work you are doing right this second.
It's fascinating how that works physiologically, too. There's some really great golf advice in the research from coaches Pia Nilsson and Lynn Marriott.
Oh, I loved this part.
Right. They observed that amateur players waste massive amounts of mental energy obsessing over their bad shots or, worrying about the water hazards.
Right, hazards, always the hazards.
Always. But from a purely mechanical standpoint, bad shots come from bad swings. And bad swings spring from bad thoughts. They're fix. You have to learn to, quote-unquote, think lovely thoughts.
Which I admit sounds a bit whimsical. But the mechanism behind it is rock solid.
Right. It's not just positive thinking fluff. The second your ego gets involved, like worrying about looking foolish in front of your friends or stressing about your score, your brain signals a threat.
Fight or flight.
Yes. Your body floods with tension, and a tense muscle cannot execute a fluid, natural golf swing.
It's physically impossible.
By forcing the brain to drop the ego and focus on a lovely thought, you are literally hacking your nervous system to relax your muscles. You get the ego out of the way, and the body does what it's trained to do.
It all converges beautifully on a concept distilled by Jim Elliot. He summarized this entire philosophy in just 6 words. Wherever you are, be all there.
Wherever you are, be all there. It sounds so simple, but it is agonizingly hard to actually do.
Because full presence demands the death of the ego. It means you aren't divided between past regrets and future anxieties. You aren't monitoring how smart you look.
You're just in it.
Exactly. But that state of complete, self-forgetful presence is the only place where reality actually happens.
Okay, so if getting out of our own head is the goal, how do we actually cross that bridge? Because, honestly, my ego puts up a massive fight.
As does mine. As does everyone's.
The sources suggest we have to pass through the gate of humility, which makes logical sense. I mean, you can't learn anything new if your cup is already full, if you secretly think you already have all the answers.
Right.
But I have to push back on this. In our fast-paced modern corporate world, appearing ignorant feels fatal.
It feels incredibly risky.
It does. Nodding along and faking confidence in a high-stakes meeting isn't just ego. It feels like basic survival. Why is faking it so destructive if it keeps you from getting fired?
What's fascinating here is how the philosopher Epictetus diagnosed this exact problem. And he was completely uncompromising about this. He said, throw out your conceited opinions, for it is impossible for a person to begin to learn what he thinks he already knows.
Impossible.
Notice he doesn't say it's difficult. He says it's impossible.
Because the brain literally stops looking for new information. Like if I convince myself I understand the new software rollout just to save face in a meeting, I'm not going to ask the follow-up questions that would actually explain the software to me.
Exactly. You've shut the door. And author Ryan Holiday reframes this so we don't just feel ashamed of it. He points out that this conceit is the universal human condition.
We're all doing it.
We are biologically wired to protect our status in the tribe. But the fatal danger in the modern world is that when you perform a competence you don't actually possess, you sever your connection to reality.
Wow.
You start building strategies on a foundation of your own ignorance. Isabel Wilkerson elevates the stakes on this perfectly. She writes that we are ultimately responsible for our own ignorance or our own wisdom.
It's a choice.
It's not a one-time choice either. It's a micro decision you make 50 times a day. Are you willing to sit in that highly uncomfortable, vulnerable space of not knowing long enough for real understanding to take root?
You have to voluntarily choose the fleeting, temporary embarrassment of an honest question over the permanent foolishness of silence.
Very well put.
There's a quote from Ralph Waldo Emerson that radically shifts this perspective for me. He said, "Every man I meet is my master in some point, and in that I learn of him."
That is profound.
I want you, the listener, to really imagine applying that tomorrow. Every person. The intern who just started might be your master in navigating new tech. The barista might be your master in de-escalating angry customers.
That's a great way to look at it.
If you genuinely adopt that lens, every single encounter becomes a classroom. Your defenses drop.
And we can see how this ancient, almost spiritual humility translates into hard-nosed business strategy.
Yes, the business application is amazing.
Right. Seth Godin has a framework for business plans that is basically humility turned into an operating system. He says the very first section of any plan must be the truth.
With a capital T?
Yes. Not the market as you wish it were, not the optimistic projections, but the world as it actually is right now. You have to map the system so clearly and honestly that even your biggest competitors would agree with your starting point. It forces you to look before you leap.
And his next step is what really blew my mind. After truth, Godin requires an alternative section.
This is where it gets tough.
It does. He demands that you, the visionary founder writing the business plan, admit up front that your assertions will be wrong. You have to write down, here is what we will do when these specific assumptions fail.
Imagine having the confidence to put that in a pitch deck to investors.
I know, it feels risky, but it's actually the ultimate proof of competence.
It really is.
Right. I was trying to picture this, and it's like engineering a bridge. If you build a bridge and just stubbornly declare this will never collapse, well, you are letting your ego dictate your engineering. You haven't prepared for high winds or earthquakes.
You're just hoping for the best.
But if you walk into the room and say, here are the exact stress points where this bridge might fail, and here is our secondary support system for when that happens, you haven't shown weakness. You've stress tested your own idea.
Admitting you might be wrong is the stress test.
Yes. If you are too attached to your own predictions to admit they might fail, you are quite literally too proud to plan well.
You are building a bridge out of glass and refusing to hit it with a hammer just in case it breaks.
Exactly. Okay, here's where it gets really interesting. We've managed to drop our ego. We've humbled ourselves to see the truth of the road ahead.
We're doing great so far.
But maintaining that clarity when things get chaotic requires an architecture, a vessel to hold it. And that architecture is discipline.
The dreaded D word.
I know. For a lot of people listening, the word discipline sounds awful. It sounds like a straitjacket. It sounds like waking up at 4 a.m. and taking cold showers and punishing yourself.
Yeah.
But we have this famous paradox from Aristotle. Through discipline comes freedom. How on earth do constraints and rules actually create liberty?
It completely flips your worldview when you realize that freedom is not the absence of obligations. Freedom is the presence of capacity.
The presence of capacity. Let that sink in.
If you have no habits, no rules for yourself, no training, you are actually free. You are entirely at the mercy of your immediate impulses, your mood swings, and whatever external circumstances hit you that day.
You're just a leaf in the wind.
Exactly. The free person is the one whose nature has been trained so thoroughly that they can respond to any situation from a position of capacity and strength, rather than just reacting blindly.
And I love that the Stoics believed this training had to be intensely physical. We have this modern cliche of philosophers as these soft academics lounging around in togas debating
Right,
ideas.
the guys on the marble steps.
Yeah, but they were hardcore. Socrates wasn't just a teacher, he was a decorated soldier and a wrestler. He literally believed it was a disgrace for anyone to grow old without seeing the beauty and strength of which their body is capable.
Which is pretty intense.
It is. Chrysippus was a competitive distance runner. Seneca, one of the wealthiest men in Rome, would purposely live on lean rations and forage for food in the wild just to prove to himself he didn't need luxury to survive.
For them, the body and the mind were not separate domains. They were a single, integrated project. If you never push your physical body to its limits, you lose the capacity to understand, in your very nervous system, what discipline produces.
It has to be felt.
It does. You have to experience that exact moment when your trained body effortlessly does something that used to feel agonizingly impossible. That physical rewiring is how you truly grasp what Aristotle meant by discipline creating freedom. It's building the capacity to do the impossible on demand.
And that capacity bleeds directly into our mental hurdles, too. Think about perfectionism.
Oh, that's a big one.
Author Barbara Sher has this ruthless cure for perfectionism, which she correctly identifies as just ego in a fancy disguise. Perfectionism is your ego saying, my effort is only worth making if the circumstances are flawless and guaranteed to succeed.
And her answer is brilliant.
Brutal but brilliant. She says you don't need endless time and perfect conditions. Do it now, do it today, do it for 20 minutes and watch your heart start beating.
20 minutes of messy, disciplined action completely shatters the illusion of perfect, unexecuted intentions.
Which brings us to the absolute pinnacle of this architecture, emotional discipline.
This is the hardest part.
Oh, without a doubt. There is a reference to an anonymous devotional text called Pilgrims, which outlines the 3 distinct choices we have when we experience a powerful emotion like anger.
Okay, let's break these down.
The first choice is suppression. You swallow it, but suppression turns inward, right? It rots your insides and creates resentment.
It's swallowing poison.
Exactly. And the second choice is expression, which is what our culture usually champions. Let it out, vent your frustrations.
But expression just takes that poison and sprays it all over your coworkers, your spouse, your kids.
Yeah.
It hurts you, and it causes collateral damage.
Yeah, nobody wins there. Which leaves the third option, the one that requires immense capacity, transformation.
This is the interior equivalent of that heavy physical workout.
It is. It means you don't bury the anger, but you also don't explode with it. You work the emotional material and change its nature entirely. You redirect the energy.
How do you usually visualize that?
Well, I was trying to map this out mentally, and it's basically a combustion engine, right? Anger is just fuel. It's a raw spike of adrenaline and energy. Venting your anger is like just pouring gasoline on the floor and lighting a match. It makes a loud noise and burns the garage down.
Right, very destructive.
And suppressing it is like letting the fumes build up in a closed room until it inevitably explodes. But transformation is putting that highly volatile fuel into an engine. You capture the explosion inside the cylinder, and you use it to drive the pistons forward.
That is a phenomenal analogy.
Thanks. You use the energy of the anger to aggressively tackle the problem rather than attacking the person.
It is much harder to build an engine than to just light a match.
Oh, true.
It takes longer, and nobody gives you a medal for it because the work is invisible to the outside world. But the biblical proverbs confirm this exact outcome. A fool gives full vent to his anger, but a wise man keeps himself under control.
Under control.
And control there doesn't mean bottling it up. It means engineering that transformation. It is the ultimate freedom.
Okay, so let's tie this all together. We've established the mindset, shrinking the blue dot of the ego, and embracing the vulnerability of humility. We've built the engine, physical, mental, and emotional discipline.
We have the vehicle.
We have the vehicle. How do we put this vehicle on the road? How do we use this to actually navigate the world? This brings us to strategic clarity. If we circle back to Mark Twain, hearing the rhyme of history means seeing reality clearly, totally divorced from our wishful thinking. How do we apply this to the future?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, we can look back at Seth Godin's business framework. We talked about truth and alternatives, but the final section of his plan is time.
Time.
And time is the ultimate test of strategic clarity. Godin asks, how will the unseen axis of time inform your planning so you are leading and not following?
Right, because time is the only variable you can't hustle your way out of.
Exactly. A leader who understands time, who has disciplined themselves to see reality and hear the rhythm of cycles and consequences, isn't just reacting to crises as they hit.
They see them coming.
She is anticipating them. When a market crashes or a competitor pivots, she isn't panicked. She's already heard the song before. She built the alternative plans.
There is an aphorism in the research that captures this perfectly. Better choices now means more choices later.
I love that.
Every single decision you make today is either expanding or contracting your future possibilities. The discipline you practice at 7 a.m. literally enlarges the options you have available at 3 p.m.
That's a great way to put it.
Strategic clarity is just feeling that truth in your bones right now and letting it guide your actions before the consequences force your hand.
And this is where all our disparate sources beautifully converge. If you look at Peter Drucker's model of leadership, the one who listens, who owns mistakes, who subordinates their ego to the task, and you map it onto Godin's strategic model, they are identical.
Wow, yeah.
Drucker's humble leader is operating entirely from Godin's concept of truth. Because their ego isn't in the way, they are gathering real, untainted data about the world, instead of wasting energy defending a fabricated narrative about how smart they are.
Which is the defining difference between confidence and clarity.
Exactly.
We live in a world that rewards loud, ego-driven confidence. But the organization that builds leaders who operate from truth, who transform their anger into forward motion, will always outlast and outperform the ones relying on blind bravado.
Without question.
So what does this all mean? When you step back and look at this entire mountain of source material, the most remarkable thing is the absolute total consensus. We are looking at wisdom spanning 25 centuries.
It's staggering when you think about it.
From classical Athens to ancient proverbs to modern baseball dugouts to the fairways of professional golf to 20th century boardrooms. And there is not a single dissenting voice.
Not one.
Not one of these brilliant minds says, actually, the secret to success is obsessing over yourself. Nobody says, protect your certainty at all costs and never admit you don't know. Nobody says, wait for perfect conditions or make sure you vent all your anger so people know you're mad. The agreement is absolute.
It is a profound, echoing consensus across human history. And I think the most human-scaled version of this entire synthesis comes from Marcus Aurelius.
Let's hear it.
Remember, he was writing this alone in a tent at the edge of the Roman Empire, carrying the weight of the world, with zero intention of anyone ever reading his words. He wrote to himself, "Don't overwhelm yourself by picturing your life all at once. Just this moment, just this task, just this choice."
Wow. The rhyme beneath the rhythm isn't some esoteric, complicated puzzle. The map is beautifully simple. Get out of your own way. Turn off the giant blue dot. Stay humble enough to realize every person you meet knows something you don't.
Absolutely.
Build the disciplines, physical, mental, and emotional, that transform volatile fuel into forward momentum.
Right.
And think honestly about where you are right now. Do it today, even if it's just for 20 minutes.
Just 20 minutes.
We want to thank you for joining us on this deep dive. We've covered a massive amount of ground today, but before we go, we want to leave you with one final thought to mull over as you step back into whatever your day holds. If history is always rhyming and the pattern is already playing around you right now, what is the specific song you've been stubbornly trying to play out of tune in your own life, simply because your ego hasn't paused long enough to listen to the underlying beat?